Alright, so this video isn't really going over anything newsworthy. It's not really anything in the media that's being reported or talked about on TV. It's just kind of an idea going around there on social media that I've been seeing a lot of discourse about over the past few days. So let's respond to some of it and give my own opinions here, because I know if we do anything like a live stream or whatever, somebody is going to ask about this. And it's referring to the entire Jack Eichel thing, specifically the idea of Jack Eichel potentially being traded to the LA Kings, and just the overall components about that. Now, we've made a video already talking about Eichel and a potential trade to LA and how exactly that could go down, but things over the past few weeks have kind of blown up in terms of Buffalo Sabres fans intricately nitpicking individual pieces about LA Kings prospects and assets that they have, and combined with the fact that you had Drew Doughty making some comments that got a lot of Kings fans super antsy as to what's going to happen next, it really pushes the narrative as to whether or not an Eichel trade to LA would make more sense than it did before, and what exactly the assets involved would be. So we're talking about Jack Eichel, we're also talking about Quinton Byfield, and we're also talking about Alex Turcotte, because I think Turcotte and Byfield, everybody can kind of agree, are two of the most valuable assets in terms of their long-term projectability. And if you were to say, okay, we're going to have these assets here on the market, who is worth more in terms of trade value? It's Byfield and Turcotte that are probably the highest up there. So, for Jack Eichel, he's in a spot where we all kind of know the story here. Neck surgery, he wants to do it, the team doesn't want him to do it. He's still a very good hockey player, and he's got a boatload of money attached to his name that takes him until 2026. Drew Doughty, in his media availability at the end of the year, said that if significant moves are not made by the LA Kings front office this summer, he will not be happy with the direction the franchise is going. He had to actually think about the answer. They asked it to him, he waited a bit, and then he said no. That's after going off on a big rant talking about how him and Kopitar and Quick and Brown are not really getting any younger, and they can't just be sitting around rebuilding and waiting for young guys. They gotta make moves, man. Make moves to acquire players that can help them out today. And a lot of Kings fans, I had some of my DMs telling me, hey, I gotta feel like this is Jack Eichel they're talking about. And even though Jack Eichel is not the only potential top 6 asset that would be available via trade, he certainly is the main one. And when it comes to the Jack Eichel trade rumors, we've only really been noting New York and LA as two potentials that would actually be able to fill the need that the Sabres would establish for a Jack Eichel trade package, which was, as revealed by Renaud Lavoie, 4 first-round caliber assets. And so when it comes to Jack Eichel, obviously Sabres fans are going out there talking about, oh, I'd rather keep our guy, I want to keep our captain, see how he develops, and see what happens with the neck surgery. There are other Sabres fans that are saying the contrary. Okay, he wants out? Get him out of here. We got Dylan Cousins instead. We're good. And while I was kind of being hyperbolic when I said that, there are indeed a whole bunch of Sabres fans discussing in all parts of social media what you would trade Eichel for. And when it comes to New York and LA, these are the two that the Sabres fan base is having the most fun with. For LA specifically, it's because they have 2 of these center prospects, Quinton Byfield and Alex Turcotte, that would be extraordinarily valuable in a Jack Eichel trade. But the problem lies in where exactly you choose to evaluate their value. Because we have some people, I think it was Craig Button the other day, not really too sure on that 100%, but I am kind of getting that feeling that it was Button, again I might be wrong, that said that they wouldn't consider a Jack Eichel trade to LA unless Turcotte and Byfield were involved. And when you have statements made like that, it really goes to show where you are evaluating the talent level of an Alex Turcotte and of a Quinton Byfield. Sticking on the topic of Craig Button, remember, he's the guy that had Quinton Byfield, I believe, at like 5th or 6th overall sometime earlier in the draft year last year. Yeah, crazy stuff, right? He went 2nd, so, But on the subject of Quinton Byfield, if I'm Rob Blake, I'm going out there and my goal is to satisfy the older veterans on the team. I see what Drew Doughty says in the media, and all of a sudden my mandate is to get Jack Eichel in a trade scenario that the Sabres would actually say yes to. If I'm the guy in charge, I'm doing my best to avoid Quinton Byfield, because This is a guy taken second overall. He is an absolute unicorn of an NHL projection. Button himself said that he is like a Evgeny Malkin. I honestly think he has a little bit of a more finesse kind of edge to his game than Malkin does. Byfield's big, he's swift, he's a ballerina with the puck on his stick, and the guy can absolutely create offense. This is the kind of player that can really lead a franchise as a number one undisputed game-changing center. And those are the same kind of descriptors that you can use to define Jack Eichel. They don't really play the same way, in my opinion, but the status and the caliber of player they are, I think could be viewed as pretty similar, in my opinion at least. And so if you're taking a look at that price that the Sabres have of 4 first-round caliber assets, and you're saying, okay, Quinton Byfield in this context could be seen as a very equal comparable to Jack Eichel, is it really worth 3 more first-round caliber assets to essentially just move up a few years in terms of development? Because if you trade Byfield for Eichel 1-for-1, assuming these guys are going to be similar players in their primes, what you're really doing is just shifting the timelines 5 years in advance. If it's 1-for-1, you're saying, okay, Byfield is now here in Buffalo. We're now 5 years behind from our franchise number 1 center like we had with Eichel. Same goes in LA. Okay, Drew Doughty wanted a guy to be acquired and already be a top piece instead of waiting for these young guys to develop into that role. Okay, here we go. Jack Eichel. It's essentially Quinton Byfield 5 years removed if you take a look at it from a talent evaluation point of view. And is that transaction, that moving up in time, really worth 3 extra first-round caliber assets? Is it really worth it to say Quinton Byfield, Alex Turcotte, a first-round pick, and, I don't know, Arthur Kaliev or Tobias Bjornfot or Samuel Fagemo for Eichel? To me, it's not. Which is why you evaluate Alex Turcotte instead, because Quinton Byfield, because of how good this guy could be, he's the number 1 prospect in the system for the LA Kings. I'd be doing everything in my power to avoid having that Byfield conversation. Instead, you start thinking about Vilardi, you start thinking about Turcotte, you start thinking about the other centers that you have that aren't projected to being the number 1 guy. Because at the very least, if you have a Byfield and an Eichel on your team, it's really tough to go wrong with that. And that's not trying to disrespect Vilardi or Turcotte or whatever, but Byfield is just such a crazy combination of skill, size, mobility, and this guy projects to being what some scouts, Cam Robinson especially, is calling a unicorn. And I think just because you have these evaluations of talent, the tiers, you would say, okay, Byfield is a little bit more valuable than a Turcotte would be, because at Turcotte's best, he could be a very capable, top 6, hardworking, maybe even potentially first-line guy who could pot you some really good two-way numbers and get on the score sheet at the same time. Don't get me wrong, Turcotte is great, but Byfield has literally been hyped up ever since the guy was like 15, 16 years old as the next best thing coming out of the OHL. And so, if you're trying to evaluate just strictly first-round caliber assets, I think you try to stay away from Byfield as much as possible, because this guy, in my opinion, could be worth a little bit more than just 1 first-round caliber asset. Instead of having a Byfield, Bjornfot, Kaliev, and first-round pick package, you could instead replace Byfield with Turcotte, and I think you win a lot more with the end result of having a Byfield and Eichel on your team with Vilardi and a Kopitar, my goodness, instead of what would be the other options of giving up Byfield and 3 other first-round caliber talents. And so all it is, man, it's just a matter of questions, which is why I've been talking about this here, because Sabres fans all over have been discussing, okay, Byfield, Turcotte, give us Byfield and Turcotte. All these guys, man. Oh, is Byfield really worth it? Oh, I want Turcotte more. Things like that. I've been seeing so much discourse when it comes to the LA Kings and their center prospects. And of course, the Rangers are definitely in there too. Been seeing so much of that in regards to Jack Eichel trade discussion that I kind of wanted to just make another video highlighting that, because it's not really something new on the channel. We definitely have talked about Eichel and the movement with Byfield and potentially all that stuff earlier on, but it's gotten a lot bigger the past few weeks. I wonder why. I really do wonder why. Maybe it's because with the draft lottery odds establishing themselves and the fact that the Kings could potentially get themselves another one of these centers. Maybe that's it. If the Kings get themselves Matty Beniers and a Kent Johnson, all of a sudden I think there's a lot more of an easier decision to make if you're going to Buffalo and you're asking for Jack Eichel. That's kind of just me, but hey, let me know in the comments what you think. Byfield, Turcotte, Eichel, a trade if you're a Sabres fan or a Kings fan. What's your mindset on this? Let me know in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this. Rolls 99. And bye.